Hi, I'm Max Keiser. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. Time now to go to Los Angeles and talk with Jeff Shively and William Gagan of Op Livestream Syria. All right, Jeff, welcome to the Keiser Report. William, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
All right, fantastic. So, William, you just returned from Syria where you traveled on a crowd-funded piece of journalism, crowdfunding, the dragon slayer to mainstream media, the new paradigm buster. Tell us about the process of the site that you did this on. How much did you raise, and who chose the location?
To start off, I chose the location. It was something that I had been thinking about watching the news, and I had to crowdfund it because that's the way we've worked here in the United States, is crowdfunding every trip that we did. So I actually used a donation site called WePay to crowdfund it. I put out a call on the internet through Facebook and Twitter and various social media portals, and basically said, I want to go to Syria. I want to live stream. I want to show the plight of the people there. I want to tell the truth, and you know, I was able to raise about $5,000 over the course of about a week and a half.
Fantastic. Now, Jeff, your background is computer security and as a telecomics agent. So how did you get involved first in the Occupy Wall Street movement and now in this crowd-funded reporting project?
Well, basically, I first got involved in the Occupy Wall Street movement when I saw some videos being displayed that weren't getting mainstream media attention. The Scott Olson video of him getting hit in the head with a tear gas canister in Oakland. The other videos, the Cal State Berkeley beating videos, and basically worked from a communications perspective and a distribution element to help get those videos out to mainstream media. And as far as Op Livestream Syria goes, I was running operations for Will at headquarters, our headquarters in New York. And once Will did his first broadcast from Istanbul, he was receiving death threats, and people were claiming he was a CIA agent. And we also learned about some Syrian malware that was being developed and distributed to target journalists and activists. So we knew that we needed to step up the security element of things. Will called me, said come over, and I got a ticket within a few hours and was on my way.
Now, what's very exciting about this whole crowdfunding phenomenon is that in the space of P2P networking and the social networking revolution, and then, of course, with the internet, you have incredible ways for distribution. But up until now, there's never been really any way to do the funding aspect of these productions. So now, finally, you've got this P2P social networking phenomenon has disintermediated, if you will. They've gotten rid of the gatekeepers on the funding side. So you guys are completely free to produce, distribute, and fund these projects. Now let's focus on this Syria subject for a moment. Nada Bakri, a Lebanese journalist covering Syria for the New York Times, said, quote, "It's been very hard to cover Syria because you're relying on activist accounts, activists that you've never met. You don't know what their agendas are." Now, if this journalist, who is very familiar with the region and who speaks the language, is unable to discern the agenda of all the disparate elements there, how did you guys navigate this issue? Because obviously you're a stranger in a strange land. How did you navigate through that?
Well, we had contacts with a lot of activists, with the FSA, with civilians inside of Syria and in Turkey, and pretty much we've been digesting as much information as possible from these people, and we're trying to just report on what we actually see from our own eyes and develop some of our own contacts on the ground. You know, when we went into Syria, we took our own route in. We were led by a Syrian military defector, and we interviewed the FSA. We saw one of their camps, and you know, we're trying to get the information from the people, directly from the people, as to not be biased on either side.
Well, clearly, in the case of the Syria reporting, it's incredibly lopsided when you contrast it to what's happening in a country like Bahrain. And I know one of the mainstream outlets out there, Al Jazeera English, is now in a tremendous flack that they're getting because apparently they're completely biased suddenly. They're not covering Bahrain at all, and they're just going with the the government in Syria and their line of thinking, and you guys are there, you're on the ground, you're journalistically doing what a journalist does, looking for the truth. But of course, there is another element to this networked world that we live in, because you have guys, so-called activists like Danny from Syria, who CNN is being there to prove, they're forced to prove that he's not fake. He's their guy on the ground in Syria. So how do you deal with this? Because it's very difficult in this age of it's very easy to go and be in a country like Syria and shoot on great equipment, and just you got distribution, you've got funding. But it's also great to come up with fake news. You know, it seems to be an increasing problem. How do you deal with that?
I think being on the ground there for us, it was actually what we were trying to do. Was we were trying to bypass those activists and bypass, you know, those people, and actually go see for ourselves, so we could actually report back to people that actually might trust what was coming from us more than they're going to trust various activist reports and the mainstream media who are actually feeding off those activists and those reports. And so that was, I mean, that was our purpose in going, trying to find out the truth for ourselves so we could take it directly back to everyone at home. And I think that's really valuable to the people back here, is that they can actually see a firsthand report from us that is not coming through multiple people before it gets to us. We're telling the truth of what we're seeing right there before our eyes.
I think it's also important to note that when we got on the ground, we were attending pro-Assad rallies, we were attending, anti-Assad rallies, we were attending all of these different meetings and meeting with, working with activists and working with the pro-Assad groups in Turkey and in Syria. So, and just showing, I think a lot of media will only show one side of the picture, and what we wanted to do was just show as much as we can from both sides and enable the discussion from that point. In the future, the more crowd-funded journalists, the more independent journalists we can get on the ground around these situations, I think the truth has a higher probability to come out.
All right, let me ask you something more of a personal question. What in the last 2 or 3 years or 5 years, what incident or event or action or a person galvanized you on a personal level to go down this path of truth-seeking and to go into these war-torn areas? Can you identify any one event or person that really got you in going on this path?
I have to say, Max, for me, it's my mother. You've been following the Occupy Wall Street movement here and the protests and whatnot. And when that started, I had just actually had tragedy in my family. My mom lost her business and her home due to the economic crisis here in the United States. And so for me, it really got real at that point. And then Occupy Wall Street started, and I really felt, this is what I've been waiting for. And so I stepped out of my normal life as a college student and a bartender working in a restaurant and left all that behind, quit my job, quit school, and left to start covering these protests. I almost from day one, I became an independent journalist out there live streaming. That was my motivation, and since then it has just been the next step in that progression, and Syria was the last step, and who knows what the next one will be.
All right, let's talk about the next one. I know that you were going to go to the G8 in Chicago. They've moved the venue to Camp David, but I think you're still going to be doing something with the G8. I know something is on Pirate My Film. It's listed. People are, if you want to help crowdfund your work, they can go to piratemyfilm.com. But is there a G8 film coming, or are you going to bypass the G8? Or are you doing something for G8?
We're still going to go to the G8, and we're also going to be at NATO in Chicago. That's going to be, the protest laws in Chicago that have been implemented are providing an interesting challenge for us, and we're going to use it to showcase a lot of new tools in citizen and independent journalism. We have a drone helicopter that is capable of live streaming. We have cameras that we can mount on buildings that can stay live for days and days upon end without having any recharging. And we're going to set up our headquarters and our hub there and alternate communication networks and we're gonna capture what goes on there, and maybe we can turn it into a film. If the battle in Seattle is any indication of what's to come in Chicago for NATO, and all of the activists that we're seeing who have already booked tickets and hotels to fly in from around the world. I don't think that since the G8 has been moved, I don't think it means that we should pull out from protesting, or for covering the protests, rather. That it's the time that we should stay strong and advance to cover these events, and that goes for both NATO and G8.
Well, you mentioned the battle in Seattle, which was anti-globalization protest, really that kicked things off. I think that was in 1999. And it was a huge outcry from around the world. And then the momentum of that was really snuffed out 2 years later with the events of 9/11. And then this coalesced again in Occupy Wall Street, which was really a phase that came after the battle in Seattle. But looking at the historical frame of reference here, you talk about Chicago, you go back to 1968. Of course, the Democratic National Convention of 1968. This was an extremely important year in political activism around the world. That was against the war, the Vietnam War. But it seems to me as though we are in the midst of another war. This is a war against, it's tough to put your finger on it, but it's a war against civil liberties, it's a war against freedom of the press, it's a war against your generation. It seems almost intergenerational that the old guard is simply taking all the money and running, leaving you guys high and dry. Would you agree with that?
Certainly. I feel like our generation is feeling it more than the last generation. I feel we, at this point, have started to realize that something's wrong and feel like somebody's sticking it to us. And to be honest, with the technology and the way social media and the internet works today, we have a way to communicate that among ourselves. And so it's not the same as it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. We can instantly communicate what, our fears about what's happening and organize better because of all the platforms that are out there that we have at our fingertips. Twitter, Facebook, Pirate My Films. With these tools, we're going to be able to make a change and communicate effectively.
Which is also why I think the powers to be want to institute rules and laws and censorship bills like SOPA and ACTA to limit the capabilities of the game-changing tool, which is the internet.
All right, Jeff Shively and William Gagan, we're out of time, but thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report. We'll be checking in with you again soon.
All right.
Thank you very much.
All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I want to thank my guests, Jeff Shively and William Gagan. If you want to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.